Hi, everybody. Welcome to year 24, season 47, episode 14 of KGB Monday Night Poetry. We have a slightly unorthodox and very exciting event for you tonight. So a few wonderful poets coming to us by way of Four-Way Books, one of the most significant poetry presses in the United States. I will pass it off to Matthew Yeager for our first introduction.
Our first poet tonight is Rodney Terich Leonard. He was born in Nicksburg, Alabama, an Air Force veteran who served during the Gulf War. His society profiles and poems have appeared in Southern Humanities Review, Red River Review, Huffington Post, Bomb Magazine, Cortland Review, Indolent Books, What Rough Beast, Four-Way Review, the New York Times. Maybe put that one up front. Boy, getting better. The Amsterdam News, the Village Voice for Colored Boys, and other publications. He holds degrees from the New School, NYU Tisch School of the Arts, and Teachers College, Columbia University. Callaloo Poetry Fellow. He received an MFA in poetry from Columbia University and currently lives in Manhattan. His debut book of poetry is Sweet Gum and Lightning from Four-Way Books. We welcome Rodney to KGB Monday Night Poetry.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you so much, KGB. You fine men and women and fellas and whomever you are. Just thank you so much. And Four-Way, always happy to be in the company of you and all these great readers. So Sweet Gum and Lightning, my debut collection. I'll just get right into some poems. The first epigraph, if you will, in the book is from a blues song by Bobby Blue Bland. The song is called Kiss Me to the Music. The lyric is, it's almost too much to believe. And it is almost too much to believe. I want to read a poem about home, a young home, 1977, Alabama kind of home place. Lunch menu, summer 1977, Spam, ribbon cane, popcorn and hot sauce, cucumbers and dill pickles, side of the road picked plums, knife sliced fried potatoes, boiled peanuts, mayonnaise and ketchup sandwiches, white rice with salt, pepper and butter, Vienna sausage and saltine crackers, frozen sugar-sweetened white milk, baked store-stolen yams. Doesn't that make you hungry? Good. Response to Miss Edie's every Sunday question, how are you? Fifth rum and slow piano, shoe paints out of my head. Ever felt the curt masculinity of hurt latched onto your navel? You must be scorched hearing when times were toothsome as wild salmon in couscous, about a lone leaf skating Amsterdam's canals, the small hand of the clock, 7 p.m. each July, tucking under collars at the North Sea Jazz Festival, about lavender and peppermint tub soaks, and the auburn creased refrigerator note, we are us, whether loved or lonely. I was always a veteran warrior, wide within winter waters, Miss Edie, nibbling and gnawing on memory. Apartment 5C on 73rd and 5th, whistled mattress and Magnum, tuition and food again. This is a rather long one, a poem written in quatrains. Complexion. Just to let you know, the you in this poem doesn't sit still. So it's all around the place. Sauntering. Complexion. Because I don't tissue paper blame, which gets the drift that no one, alive or dead, gives a damn. Not in my burgundy suite where Lit thought he farted, but he shit. The gray in my beard grows here, is not cosmetic. Someone's daughter mews on cue, but can't return a hug. Oh, 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 oh well. She's not to blame for Lenny's thong fetish or Camden-born Prince Albert. This poem yachts and swings, dig it, talk it, pop it taut and sagacious. To get my gravy, I just want to be jump seat and arrow in my own historical zoom. Keep your Tonka, Tootsie Roll, and black bandana for the next cowboy. I bought me a pair of camel suede YSL Johnny Boots boo. So stop by my place first, cause I want to ski with you, wary of sirens and shade, wary of jubilee and leakage, wary of whose turn, wary of skeleton keys in apartment 33B and Ambien, wary of white, wary of delusions and corners, wary of tarot and myrrh, towers and hallelujah, wary of PTSD, dim bats, cobwebs and cry and tweak in me, that Portuguese Dutch we slant of light in the cells of Amina dungeon worried me. Blood pressure 220 over 112. She can't pray for me, that squatting on, grinning and gutting that goat. Call the ambulance and write Reverend, read me Ezekiel 16:6. And when I passed by thee and saw thee, polluted in thine own blood, I said unto thee, when thou wast in thy blood, live. It's just incredible that Martha saw something in this poem. Isn't that just amazing? You just got to give it up for 4-Way Books for taking a chance on me. I can't get over it. Such a great poem to me. What shall I do next? Because I wanted to read some happy poems. I didn't want to, oh, this book is so, oh, it's just, oh God, I have to get my head around it sometimes. I'm like, oh, did I write that? I love this one too. Identified by fingerprint. And I think it's in conversation with Lil Nas X's being nowadays. Like, you know, this is kind of my Lil Nas X moment. Well, he was actually having my moment because I'm older. But anyway, identified by fingerprint. Couplets. Unseasonably exposed to fuchsia, I left that southern town, knotted to why what secrecy. Like my first time on a Ferris wheel, complex noun, psychoanalysis, emotionally significant ideas completely or partly repressed that cause psychic conflict, leading to gentler and older men throughout my 20s and 30s, whose lives were living rooms of emotions and mirrors. Arboreta, they refused to be branches on which sediment could roost. I think I have 3 minutes left. I'm gonna try to get this one in. Oaken in the midst, bleak update to Mr. Baldwin, as in James Baldwin. Between sleet and hydrangeas, Oaken in the midst. James Arthur Baldwin, woolen and cashmere, clarity and contradiction, ascot for attic work, lotion upon the ashen. Jimmy, his hoot and language, our maestro, mood and message. Bleak update, systolic, America's bleeding noon. He swung and hit again. His cash with middle name John and Hood. May 1st, 1989, New York Daily News, $85,000 full-page headline, "Bring back the death penalty, bring back our police." Concerning the Central Park Five, exonerated in 2014, maybe hate is what we need if we're going to get something done. To know well the beginning, the scurrying and collisions, this White House is dyspeptic. A Youngstown woman, oh knows. He talks off the cuff like us. I'm tired of suave and polished. I want my country back. Exposed in the previous gale, Texas legalized same-sex love. Rachel and Nadine, Nesta and Deshawn. Still, the unleavened sides of poet and poem thin my stride and pen like prep era barebacking or another ominous trend. Aphorism: a bull will need his tail to fan flies out of his ass for more than one summer. And the last line in my book is, taught us that good beef is love. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And I've let everyone unmute themselves again. I take away the power during the readings, but in between the readings, you can unmute yourself. That was fun.
Yeah, thank you so much, by the way. We love it when people put lines that resonate with them in the chat there too. That's always really nice.
All right, and so we're going to move right along to our next reader, and I will be putting things in the chat periodically. So I put a link to purchase Rodney's book in there. I'll continue putting in links. So please do support the readers by buying their books, which also supports Four Way Books, which is a really crucial home and hub for American poetry. And I will also be putting in some fundraising materials for KGB Bar, because as you notice, you are not in a bar, and bars make money by selling drinks, and we cannot buy them. So when we put those things in, I'll make further announcements in between. But let's get on to our next reader, Kevin Prufer. Kevin Prufer is the author of 8 books of poetry, including The Art of Fiction, How He Loved Them, Churches, In a Beautiful Country, and National Anthem, all of them from Four Way Books. He's edited several volumes of poetry, including New European Poets from Grey Wolf Press, Literary Publishing in the 21st Century from Milkweed Editions, and Into English, Poems, Translations, and Commentaries from Grey Wolf Press as well. Among his awards and honors are 4 Pushcart Prizes and several Best American Poetry selections, numerous awards from the Poetry Society of America, and fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts and the Lennon Foundation. His poetry collection, I apparently cannot talk tonight, How He Loved Them, was long listed for the 2019 Pulitzer Prize and received the Julie Suk Award for the Best Poetry Book of 2018 from the American Literary Press. Prufer is a professor in the Creative Writing Program at the University of Houston and the Low Residency MFA at Lesley University, one of the most distinctive and interesting voices in American poetry. Please welcome Kevin Prufer.
Thank you. And thanks to the other readers and KGB Bar, where I really like to be when it's not a pandemic.
I'm sorry, Kevin, you're muted.
I'm muted
Oh, you're back, okay.
Okay, good. I just pressed the space bar. I didn't realize that muted me. Thank you. Sorry about that. And thanks to everybody. And I won't thank everybody again. I just thanked everybody. And now I'm going to read a poem. I'm reading a poem that takes place in Texas that I don't read very often. It is true that I was actually driving down the highway here in Houston, Texas, and I heard on the radio that our Texas problem with wild hogs has gotten so out of control that the city actually did commission a group to devise some kind of poison to poison them. And the Publishers Weekly thought it was fictional, but it is true that the name of the poison is actually hog kaput. So this poem is called Hog Kaput. It has many little stars in it, or plus signs rather. I had this idea that each section in a poem is like in addition to the previous section. So, and then I imagine at the end of this and all the poems in this book, that there's an invisible equal sign at the end. Hog kaput. Because we couldn't control their population and because they destroyed our parks and farmlands, we proposed to place in troughs a kind of poison called hog kaput. The poison, a blood thinner, killed humanely, and in the video we presented to the legislature, the hog in the lab took only a few steps before falling on its side. "Hello," said the feeding trough to the hungry hog. "Come here." At first, the hog eyed the metal trough with suspicion. He'd grown accustomed to the pleasure of the farmer's field and that place by the riverbank where the wild blackberry brambles tickled his hide. How the sunlight dappled the muddy water and warmed his thick neck. "Come on," said the trough, and the hog lumbered over, lifted the lid with his snout, sniffed the pellets, pushed his face inside. "Heavy as shit," said the workman after he'd removed the dead hog from the testing room, hosed the floor clean and washed his hands. "Heavy as shit," he told the pregnant young woman he'd married 1 year before exactly, who sat across from him while the waiter set 2 bowls of soup gracefully on the table. "Gotta feel bad for the poor fucker," he said. And she smiled because, yes, his wasn't an easy job, but somebody, she told herself, somebody had to do it. By any definition, they were an invasive species, and the citizen farmers asked only that their lands not be disturbed, and shooting them from helicopters accomplished little. There were just too many. And even if we unintentionally poisoned scavengers that fed on their meat, it was a small price to pay to keep our American parks untrammeled and to satisfy our farmers. "You see," he told his pregnant wife, "the trouble is they reproduce, so 2 of them become 1,000, and pretty soon it's hogs everywhere. Hogs like you wouldn't believe, roving gangs of hogs." And she blew gently on the spoonful of soup, sipped it, then looked up, smiling. It tasted of carrot, it tasted of wild potato, burdock root and turnip, parsnip and sunchoke, and the hog ate and ate from the trough until he had his fill, and then the lid snapped shut and he took a step toward the river where the others lay on the banks in sunlight, and from the corners of his eyes a delightful sparkling, a kind of flicker, 1,000 fireflies crowding his vision, beautifully, beautiful really, and he took another step into what was now a kind of snowstorm. "So we can have meat for the table, so we can protect the fields, because some species are invasive, because our country needs protection, because we inhabit the land the way an ideal inhabits the mind. We submitted our proposal to the legislature, hoping they would understand why it was vital that at all costs we saw to the elimination of the hogs." "Yes," he said. It had been a very good meal, a nice anniversary. His wife was happy. Yes, she was. He could tell because when he helped her into the car, then leaned inside to hand her the styrofoam box filled with leftovers, she reached out to him, surprised him, kissing him suddenly on the mouth and squeezing his hand. So now, driving home past the fields empty of hogs, with her beside him, the 3 of them, really, if you counted the baby, well, who could be happier than he was? I think I'm going to read this other poem, which is called The Translator. And the poem has its origin in I went to hear this translator give a talk in Texas, here in Houston where I live, and he began his talk by with this metaphor. He said, "A poem in translation is like the dead body of a foreigner washed up on our shores." And like we all, like everybody in the room kind of went, "Oh," you know. And then I thought about it, and I just thought, like, that's the crappiest definition or way of thinking about translation that I can possibly think of. It manages to be like offensive to foreigners and poetry. So uh anyway, so I wrote this poem about it. It's for this translator whose name I won't say. The translator. A poem in translation, the young man was fond of saying, is like the dead body of a foreigner washed up on our shores. Here he usually paused to let the metaphor sink in. Some members of the audience nodded thoughtfully. I will now read from my translations of a little-known ancient Roman poet, he told them, shuffling his papers, then looking into the dark, half-empty auditorium. The dead body refused to be still. The waves loved it too much, pushing it onto the beach, then rolling it seaward again, and so it made its way down the beach, alighting for a moment, or several moments, on the wet sand, then bobbing out among the American swimmers. 120 foreigners in a leaking boat is too many, so the ocean fills with poems. Some retain the qualities of their original language, but others sink into a new language. Here I am, out here. I can see your oil rigs glittering on the horizon, says the young woman who no one listens to. Or she says nothing, clinging to the side of the waterlogged boat where she has floated all night among the drifting bodies. A few of them became tangled among the oil rigs, while others arrived gently on our shore. A poem that has floated some distance from its accident transforms, so the people ran away in horror when at last he came to rest on a crowded part of the beach. You foreigners in your many-sailed ships, come join the empire, the translator intones from his spot-lit podium, and the audience sighs. Here I am, out here, says a little voice inside the translation, a voice no one, not even the translator, can hear. The audience had come to hear a lecture on poetry in translation, and now the translator was going on about the ancient Roman tendency to absorb and therefore transform foreign cultures, their gods and foods. Outside the auditorium, it had grown dark, a perfect summer night. The 1,000 vessels on the great black ocean glittered and loomed. And for days, bodies washed up on that beach. Now the American workers zippered them into vinyl bags, which, in the translator's metaphor, constitutes a kind of publication. But what is there to say about the young woman, still clinging to the wreckage 2 days into my poem? A gentle summer rain prickles her skin. Here I am, she says, looking toward the oil rigs hunkering between her and the shore. Here I am. She is a very fine woman, and someone should translate her. Thank you.
Oh, are you, Kevin, did you mean to mute yourself? Are you through? Okay. All right, good. Fantastic. Thank you. Is there any chance the translator could have meant the band Foreigner? Like he was talking about, like he just really hates the song I Want to Know What Love Is. And all right. So Jada is going to introduce our next reader. And
okay. The next reader is Angela Narciso Torres. Angela Narciso Torres is the author of What Happens Is Neither from Four Way Books coming out this year. Blood Orange, winner of the 2013 Willow Books Literature Award for Poetry, and the chapbook To the Bone from Sundress Publications 2020. Her recent work appears or is forthcoming in Poetry, Missouri Review, Quarterly West, Cortland Review, and Poetry Northwest. A graduate of Warren Wilson MFA program providers and Harvard Graduate School of Education, Angela has received fellowships from Breadloaf Writers Conference, Illinois Arts Council, and Ragdale Foundation. She received the first prize in the Yeats Poetry Prize, WB Yeats Society, New York. New City Magazine named her one of Chicago's Lit 50 who really books in Chicago. Born in Brooklyn and raised in Manila, she currently resides in San Diego. She serves as a senior and reviews editor for Rhino Poetry. Ladies and gentlemen, Angela Narciso Torres.
Thank you, Jada, and thank you to the entire complement of curators here tonight for having us. Thank you, KGB Bar. This is actually my second time reading for you. The first time was in person about 5 years ago for my first book with the New York Writers Workshop, and I have great memories of that visit. And it's always a thrill to return to KGB Bar into Brooklyn because, as you just heard, I was born in Brooklyn. My parents were living there while they were completing their medical training and raising us kids. But shortly after I was born, they moved us back to Manila to raise us on Philippine soil and to give back to their homeland. But Brooklyn will always have a special place in my heart and will always be part of my identity and my family history. So it's really very special for me to be reading here tonight. I'll read 3 poems from my new collection and 1 new poem. Since we're now in AAPI month, I'd like to dedicate my first poem to my parents, who were reverse immigrants, but also I'd like to read this in honor of all the Asian immigrants who came here and stayed and survived, and those who went home and survived. So this is the immigrant visits her mother. Those tropical mornings I woke to no sun in a shuttered room, the shuffle of slippers at my door, hall light flooding the gap her slight frame could not fill, smaller than when I last saw her. Through the net of sleep floated her voice, repeating my name. I rose, stumbled to my feet, offered my arm. Her good leg leading, we made our way to the dim lit table where I sliced a bagel neatly in half, fed it to the glowing toaster. When the rounds popped out, fragrant, golden, I spread the cream thin with a knife, layered the slivers of smoked salmon from the packet I'd carried from Chicago, a twist of lemon to finish. One bite and her eyes glazed over, forehead uncreased. For a moment, she was 26, a medical student again, lipsticked and bone-tired from her shift, sitting at a Brooklyn diner to coffee, bagel, and the Times. Here, decades and hemispheres away, dawn burns through Manila smog, licks the blinds of the kitchen where my mother fills her mouth with the salt and sting of her first New York winter, the year before I was born. So this book's theme is mainly, it's an homage and an elegy to my parents, whom I lost a week apart 2 years ago, my mother to Alzheimer's and my dad to cancer. So I'd like to read the title poem, What Happens Is Neither. What happens is neither the end nor the beginning, yet we're wired to look for signs. Consider the peonies. One makes a perfect bud after months of nothing. Another's leaves are ringed with black rot. How can I not think end? How can I not say beginning? Leaves fall when days shorten because a tree must reduce to its tough parts, twig, branch, bark. My mother sleeps away the daylight. She nods off while chewing a spoonful of fish and rice, her head a peony gone to seed. Father calls to say she doesn't recognize him. Turning to him, she cried out, certain a stranger was in her bed. He played his violin till she slept, a leaf in late fall curling into itself. In autumn, chlorophyll disappears, canceling green from leaves so yellow and magenta can blaze. In my mirror, I see her. The smile that favors a cheek, eyes slanting like the shape of small fish we eat for breakfast. Trees know best the now of things. What goes on has been going on for centuries. Washing dishes, I rest a foot on my standing leg. A fork clangs on the tile. I rinse a cracked cup. I try not to think of endings. So while the book has a lot of poems about loss and grieving and of memory, loss of loved ones, loss of time, it's also about the reinvention of the self and the rediscovery of delight after loss. Here is self-portrait as revision. I am the storm-torn palm frond draped on the balcony wall. I am the cumin in the soup stirring the lentils sleep. I am the olive's skeletal pit, the cat paw, the thistle spear, the clay in the kiln cast into a small flask to hold centuries of musk. For weeks I do not sing, though I gush, an underground rill carving blindly to the sea. I succumb to thunder, the urchin's sting, the softness of moss. This is my prayer. I am driftwood, parched in white heat, soaked in January rain, a seashell pressed to its pale grave. The wind rises, rewriting the hymnals of dunes. I am hurricaned, worn smooth again. So for my last poem, I'd like to read a newer piece, which was recently published in a journal. So it's not in the book, but I wrote this during the past year, during the pandemic, when everyone was writing so much, but I could barely write a line. And I figured if I can't write my own lines, I can always borrow or steal lines, right? So I wrote this cento using borrowed lines from Ronald Barthes' morning diary, which he started the day after his mother died and kept for 2 years. And I like it because it tells so much about his writing life and inner life as someone recovering from loss, although he's mostly known as a leading French essayist and philosopher. So this is morning diary with an MOURN, and it's written in the form of a pantoum, so it has repeating lines, but all the lines are from Barthes' diary. Morning diary. Morning, a cruel country where I am no longer afraid. The formal beginning of the long bereavement. This terrifies me. I know my morning will be chaotic. The formal beginning of the long bereavement. 18 months for a mother, a father. I know my morning will be chaotic. We don't forget, but something vacant settles in. 18 months for a mother, a father. Each of us has his own rhythm of suffering. We don't forget, but something vacant settles in. Suffering like a stone around my neck, deep inside me. Each of us has his own rhythm of suffering. This morning, the offer of lightness, suffering like a stone around my neck, deep inside me. I ask for nothing but to live in my suffering. This morning, the offer of lightness. For the first time, I decide to wear a colored scarf. I ask for nothing but to live in my suffering. I limp along through my morning. For the first time, I decide to wear a colored scarf. First Sunday morning without her. I limp along through my morning. Henceforth and forever, I am my own mother. First Sunday morning without her. Everyone is extremely nice, yet I feel entirely alone. Henceforth and forever, I am my own mother. From now on, my death would kill no one. Everyone is extremely nice, yet I feel entirely alone. This terrifies me. From now on, my death would kill no one. Mourning, a cruel country where I'm no longer afraid. Thank you.
Okay, you can now unmute yourself. That was wonderful.
All
And
right.
it was such a
Beautiful.
it was really a pleasure to hear the birds. I really enjoyed the birds in the background.
I was a little worried they were too loud, so I
No, they were.
apologize if the birds were interrupting my audio.
Oh,
It was
no,
Dogs too.
lovely.
All right, John.
All right. Well, I have the privilege of introducing a poet I've met before. Well, Jonathan Wells. Jonathan's an old friend. He's someone I'd call a lyric poet. He's, poems who have so much going on beneath the surface. It's like looking out at something beautiful, like a flat ocean, and suddenly some sea creature bobs a section of its body up, and you realize how much is probably going on underneath. You go back. At any rate, Jonathan Wells is the author of 3 collections of poetry with 4-way books. Debris is the newest, The Man with Many Pens, and Train Dance. His poems have been in The New Yorker, Plowshares, Agni, Bennington Review, and many other journals. He is a co-editor of New World Translation Series with Christopher Merrill and lives in New York. Also the editor or the author of a new memoir called The Skinny. Here is Jonathan Wells.
Thank you, John. I just want to say how grateful I am to 4-Way and to KGB too, my home away from home, the home of poetry for me. And it's great to be back, if only virtually. I'm really hoping that we can stop this soon. The first poem is called Notes from the Invasion, that I wrote for my friend Christopher Merrill. The worst has happened. There is nothing to imagine. Guards are posted at the gates of the city. Their leader is a thief. He rises and all stand for him. He doffs his hat and they bow their heads. We have surrendered our papers to the sad-faced lieutenant. Now we are abandoned to our bodies and the thin shellac of rain on the vacant pavements. The protests will begin later or never. The chants will bounce off the facades of empty buildings. Scaffolds will rattle on their stanchions. There is no light, but a shadow in the hallway. A beggar's hand was a closed fist until it was hungry. There is nothing to imagine. The worst has happened and the streets are slick. I, in my previous work, spent a lot of time at the post office. So I felt that going there again recently, that I had more to say about it than I thought. So this is my homage to the post office. Ode to the post office. The clock isn't ticking. The lines are long and time is missing. We brace ourselves against the counters as if we are balancing on an iceberg that is barely floating, the way streets stay flat while the earth is curving. Men clutch the fragile parcels of their earnings. May they arrive unbroken. Mothers clutch baby shoes wrapped in tissue. May they fit those crumpled feet. The walls are padded with envelopes and cardboard boxes. The light is simple this far from the sun. A bodiless hand reaches through plexiglass to receive the package. Some mouth in inaudible prayer. A woman leans on a counter as though she were kneeling in her pew, Apostolic Church of Solace. The world is suspended in magic like a bird cage lined with trinkets. When the gate slides open, slots, stamps like holy tokens, pens on musical chains, paper clips, stickers, and labels. Slowness is contagious. Patron saint of travelers waiting at the crossing, Saint Christopher slouches through the hall in a blue postman's suit. I'll have to see if I can get that posted somehow. The next poem is the longest poem I ever wrote. I couldn't reduce it any further. And it's about a bombing that took place in Chelsea several years ago when I was living there. And it's mostly about the bomber, mostly. Chelsea bombing. 1. First, there was the magnesium flash of sparks, then the spewed lightning. Bolts, screws, and wires fanning out from an unknown source. The victims, maimed and bleeding, running still, were hoisted and dropped down like debris the sky rains after an explosion. And then there was my conceit that this time the blast was worse because it was merely blocks away, not continents or days. Our windows rattled with the news that came in reverb waves and echoes, random act, demented warrior, God's conscript, divine belief. I fidgeted in my bed, not shouldering the lame. 2. His body curved on the pavement. Was he asleep? His forearm wrapped in gauze served as a shimmy for his head. The scene was shrouded in mist with a passing lick of rain. He had been human once before he fell. His father denounced him as a terrorist and said he'd turned sour. His sister recanted his stabbing of her leg. He worked the fat fryer at First American Fried Chicken before he fell. His co-workers said he'd grown silent, but it wasn't the silence of angels. It was the silence of living upside down in cacophony, cowering in an echoed chamber of curses and vows unraveling that only dynamite could drown out. Pissed himself on a doorsill, he reeked of disappointment. The solace of heaven shattered like a snow globe on the sidewalk. Dishevelment, another sign of his impatience for deliverance to what was holy. 3. The city grid was rotated 29 degrees clockwise to true west, so the sun nested in the cleavage of buildings at the end of 23rd Street. Once burly stones now glossed to slab, their sleek skin carried a faint rose sheen, mirroring the river and the solstice evening. Manhattanhenge, midsummer barged past us. The year tilted towards its shrinking. He was a terrorist and we were victims. We were terrorists and he was a victim. Distinctions boiled off and the broad street flowed back and forth from river to river, end to end. The last poem that I'd like to read is called April Morning. And technically it's not April anymore, but today was as crappy a day as April, so I think it's only fair to read it. April Morning. You are living the life you wanted as if you'd known what that was, but of course you didn't, so you'd grope toward it, feeling for what you couldn't imagine, what your hands couldn't tell you, for what that shape could be. This Sunday, the rain turns cold again and steady, but the window is slightly open and there is the vaguest sense of birdsong somewhere in the gaps between the buildings, because it's spring, the calendar says, and the room where you are reading is empty yet full of what loves you, and this is the day that you were born. Thank you.
Okay, Val, thank you. You can unmute yourself. You see why we're so happy that we get to see Jonathan almost every week when we're in person. But anyway, I am going to interrupt briefly for the fundraising section. So I've put in very briefly, I put in the chat the link to our Fundly site. It's not our Fundly site, it's actually the KGB bar Fundly site. So just think about whatever you would have spent on a drink, whatever you might have tipped the bartender. If you can make that contribution to KGB bar, that would be great. It is public and we're very competitive with the other KGB series. So if you can just say like Monday night poetry is wonderful, or compliment the curators and say, oh, I would have had 4 drinks if I could have been there tonight with them. Just something so that we stand out.
Yeah, we're like fighting for our parents' attention, right, Jason?
Yeah. That's exactly it. Yes, we want to be known as the best sibling. And now I will turn it over to Matt, who will introduce Abigail. Matt, you're not unmuted yet. There you go.
Thank you. Abigail Wender's debut collection, Reliquary, will be published in February 2021. Should say it has been published since February 2021 by Four Way Books. Her poems have been published in Bodega, the Cortland Review, DMQ Review, Epiphany, Guernica, Kenyon Review, Massachusetts Review, New Orleans Review, the Madison Review, and other journals and anthologies, including the Traveler's Macum, a poetry anthology. Her translations from German have appeared in Epiphany, Tupelo Quarterly, and the New Haven Review. She is currently completing a translation of Iris Haneke's award-winning contemporary German novel, The Bureau of Past Management, to be published in fall 2021 by V&Q Books. We welcome Abigail to KGB Monday Night Poetry.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, KGB. It's nice to be here. And it's wonderful to read with my fellow pressmates. And thank you to Four Way, of course. This is an honor to have this book out. And yeah, it's a great honor. And thank you to all my friends who are here listening. I appreciate that. I'm happy to read to you tonight. I'll read a few poems. Let's see. This first poem is called Sri Lanka, and doesn't really need much of an introduction. Sri Lanka. Newly wedded, we borrowed 2 Schwinns from the rest house and rode out into the jungle. He hurried ahead on the road like a moon wandering a cold sky. I was in his country for the first time. He sped on, his white shirt aglow. I tried to ignore the young soldiers lifting their rifles, the monkeys in the trees throwing stones. A water buffalo turned its head as we passed the reservoir where women washed their hair, stone pillars elbowed from weeds, and the sun flamed out. The bow tree we circled, grown from a sapling of Buddha's tree, another transplant, was draped with flags, roots half buried by incense, ash, and lottery stubs. Hundreds of years ago, a monk carved these words on a rock to his beloved. Talk to me gently of your heart impenetrable. I seek you in the monk's arcane verse, the improbable evidence of things I long to see, like those who hold oil lamps to light the road. Most of this book is, or I should say the obsessions of this book are the death of one of my brothers and the death of my mother. And around those 2 occurrences, the other poems find their way. So this poem is a poem I wrote when somebody said to me, he sounds like he was a pain in the ass. So I wrote this poem called Brother. Because he can't tell his own story, may he never sleep another night in jail. May he never shiver heroin sweat, flea bitten, rib broken. Because he forgot that we'd walked with our dog, may he never forget the blue spotted salamanders we found in muddy banks, or how we swung by the rope into those rough waves. May he sing all night, dream of a sunflower woman, and let me forgive him, brother and consolation, though he dealt me a bad hand and the price rose. Let me not forget him, brother and sorrow, returned from prison those 5 years engulfing him like a rubber suit, his cheerless eyes pondering me, my every fortune. There was I went to Warren Wilson also, and actually I went with Angela. And there was Reg Gibbons gave a class on apostasy. And I think every poet who saw that wrote their own via negativa. And this is my via negativa. This time I won't think the sky is falling while riding the bus to Rikers Island. In the prison waiting room, no guard will touch my shoulder, say, why so scared? This time I won't be afraid, won't flinch, won't shudder. Cameras won't seek us clicking from every corner, and he won't ask if I have it, and I won't have it. Pressed in my sneaker, dope, like me, closed in a yellow balloon. So I'll move a little away from that. I wish, like Rodney, these poems were a little happier. I'm going to read a poem because it's almost Mother's Day. It's a pantoum. I think pantoums lend themselves to obsessions, actually. This one is called First Snow. And the she in this poem is my mother. First snow. If she were alive, I'd telephone. She at her window, I at mine, as snow falls aslant. She at her window, headlights sweeping out the old year as snow falls aslant. Into my hands rushes her voice again, as headlights sweep out the old year. I hear her come right now. Into my hands rushes her voice the night he died. There was an ice storm. I hear her come now. Nothing could be done. I waited the night my brother died. Ice storm, couldn't survive. Could we be done? Wait. At dawn, I drove to the city he couldn't survive and found her shaken, aghast. Dawn, I drove to the city. She was alone at last, shaken, aghast. She was at last mine. She was alone, a diffused mine. At last she was mine, an excavated mine. If she were alive today, I'd call. And I will read just one more poem. I think I haven't, unfortunately, I forgot to put on the timer, but this poem is called Dear X Chromosome. Dear X Chromosome, I have the sense we are alone. Found in ordinary cells, the extra X makes the woman, makes heart, breast, womb. Why there's all this space inside me, I don't know. Kidney, pancreas, stomach, spleen, our 100,000 miles of veins, another universe unknown. It takes 3 days to reach our moon. Despite knowing we may be alone, my arms and legs outstretch. I keep trying to solve for X. Ancient mothers live inside this X. With all this space inside me, X chromosome, mothership, mitochondria, live inside this X. Everything beautiful is far away and unknown. I own the ancient Mother X. The message from my deep space repeats inside the rocket ship. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And you can unmute yourselves. I actually wanted to say, Martha, Ryan, Sally, if you wanted to say anything about Four-Way, since we have the illustrious editor and publisher and copy editor with us and board member. No, you don't have to. All right. Matt, do you want to announce next week's reading, which will also be our season finale? Oh, sorry, Martha's mic. Matt?
There's that sound.
Oh, I thought that when you said Martha again, I was confused. Next week we have Brenda Hillman, Leroy Van Cleef Stefanon, and Carmen Jimenez Smith. So and it should be an excellent season finale.
Yeah. And another note from Martha says, thank you for featuring our readers, KGB. Yeah, I mean, everybody was fantastic tonight. I mean, Four-Way Books absolutely, spoke for itself tonight. You guys were amazing all around.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to all the poets. And Abigail, it was interesting to hear your poem, Sri Lanka, at the first poet from there. And I know that geography very well. Very good. Thank you. Look forward to reading the book.
Oh, thank you. Are you from Sri Lanka?
Yeah.
Well, nice to meet you, Indra. Through Zoom.
I'm going to stop the recording, so we're officially off the record.